Chapter 259, Underground Structure. After signing a contract with Millet Carter and receiving an advance payment of £10, Klein didn't rush to Williams Street immediately. Instead, he made an appointment for 4 in the afternoon. Millet was understanding with regard to this. Alone, Detective Sherlock Moriarty definitely had to recruit people to carry out the exploration. When the old gentleman left, Klein immediately returned to the dining table and cut the steak which had turned cold before wolfing it down. Seriously, doesn't he need to eat lunch? Why must he pick such a time to come? After barely filling his stomach, Klein bitterly began cleaning up. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Mrs. Mary arrived as scheduled. Her eyes were slightly red and puffy, but her face was turning gloomy. Stellan Sammer, who accompanied her, had no choice but to maintain her silence. Klein handed over an envelope containing his carefully chosen photo. "Madam, please confirm it." Mary paused for 2 seconds and slowly took in a breath. Then, she took the envelope, pulled out the photo, and examined it. "Excellent, very excellent. You're the most efficient and responsible detective I've ever met. I'm honored to introduce you as a member of the Kellogg Club. This is the remaining £7 for the payment. You deserve it." Mary took out a wallet from her leather handbag and counted out a £5 note and 2 £1 notes. Then, without waiting for Klein's response, she stuffed the photo back into the envelope, put it into her handbag, and abruptly got up to leave. Tap, tap, tap. Her buttonless boots made hurried sounds as she stomped on them. Stellan Sammer struggled to keep up. As she opened the door, Mary stumbled and almost fell, but fortunately, Stellan caught her. With this episode, Mary clearly slowed down and seemed to turn calm. "Madam, you forgot to take the portable camera. I'll give it to Mrs. Sammer later, and she'll bring it to you." Klein silently watched this scene, slightly shaking his head without saying anything. He returned to the second floor, took a nap, waking up comfortably to the bell chimes of the nearby church. Klein had already searched the map and confirmed that Williams Street was at the border of the West Borough and Empress Borough, a residential area in the heart of Backland. A nice house in West Borough and Hilston Borough costs about £2,500. Millet Carter's house is close to Empress Borough, and it's a property of a former viscount. The area is definitely sizable. The total purchase price will be at least £3,500, maybe even £5,000. That will be enough for a pretty decent mystical item. He actually came visiting me without a housekeeper or an attendant, perhaps because he's new in Backland and hasn't settled in. Klein put on his double-breasted coat, hat, and held his cane before heading out into Minsk Street. The gas lamps haven't been lit yet, and the streets were surprisingly darker than during the evenings. However, the air was fairly all right, without the suffocating air in the boroughs to the east. Taking a rental carriage, he went all the way to Williams Street. Klein saw a waiting valet outside the Unit 8 house. The valet, who was dressed in a red vest and light-colored trousers, bowed respectfully at the incoming visitor. "Good afternoon. Might I inquire if you're Detective Moriarty?" "Yes, I have an appointment with Mr. Carter." Klein nodded and followed the valet into a mansion with a garden and lawn. The house was 2 stories tall. The first floor was in a mess, with a lot of construction materials placed everywhere. There were workers coming in and doing some modifications. Millet Carter wasn't wearing a hat. Covering his nose, he walked over. "I'm very sorry about the mess and dirt here, but I do wish that everything will be fine before my family arrives in Backland. I can only urge them to keep working nonstop." Having said that, he looked at the valet and instructed, "Continue watching them." It's no wonder that he didn't bring any servants with him. Even his servants have become supervisors. Klein smiled and said, "I know a lot of doctors. They tell me that the newly renovated houses aren't suitable for immediate occupation. One has to wait at least 3 months to ventilate it well enough. Otherwise, old people and children who aren't strong enough will easily fall sick." "Is that so?" Millet led Klein to the basement and asked doubtfully. "I've never verified it, but I chose to believe in authority. It's said that this originated from the words passed down by Emperor Roselle." Klein casually fabricated an excuse. Millet nodded, then turned to look at the door. He couldn't help but frown before asking, "Mr. Detective, you didn't bring an assistant." There might be quite a bit of danger in that structure. I have an assistant, it's just that you can't see her. Klein lampooned as he said seriously, "This is my first visit, so I'll advance very carefully. If there are any problems, I will immediately retreat. I'm experienced in this area, so I won't put myself in a dangerous situation. If I were matched with inexperienced assistants, it might easily affect my nimble and decisive actions." Millet was startled. "You're very professional." "A professional bluff," Klein silently added. Without any further doubts, Millet led Detective Moriarty through the cluttered living room and down the stairs to a fairly spacious basement. There were no gas pipes here, but 4 metal candlesticks were set into the walls, their yellow lights flickering. Stepping on the stone pavements on the ground, Klein couldn't help but sigh in reflection. As expected of a noble's property, even the basement has been nicely decorated. Furthermore, it's almost as big as the living room of my current house. At this moment, Millet pointed ahead and said, "There's a secret door over there. It was discovered by the workers when they were renovating." Klein focused his gaze. With the not very bright candlelight, he saw a gray stone door in the corner. It should have been part of the wall, but it was now exposed. "I'll leave the rest to you. Be safe." The old gentleman Millet gave Klein a lighted lantern and cautioned him. "Has this place been ventilated ahead of time?" Klein asked cautiously. Millet shook his head indiscernibly. "It's not particularly stuffy inside, but I didn't let the workers go too far." "All right." Klein checked his belongings, put on a black glove, and under Millet's gaze, unhurriedly carried the lantern and approached the stone door. He pushed it open with his cane. Amidst the heavy creaking sounds, through the light outside, he saw a deep-colored passageway paved with stone. There were several wooden doors on both sides of the passageway and at the end. They had already begun to rot, but they were still barely usable. Not too ancient. However, the ostentatious style of the door and the depth and thickness of the stone slabs don't match. Did the Viscount's family change it before? Klein quietly activated his spirit vision, gripped his cane, and walked forward, step by step, with the lantern in hand. The light dispersed the darkness, and when he passed by the rooms on either side, he was able to see a somewhat empty scene through the open door, which was likely opened due to the exploration from the workers Millet had hired. There was also a long bench and a table that shared the same aesthetic style as the door. There's no sign of spirits flashing. Klein did a brief inspection. Without stopping, he proceeded forward until he came to the end of the hall where a black stone double door was. Stretching out his gloved right hand, he half-clamped his cane and slowly pushed against the door. A jarring sound of friction began to reverberate through the air as the stone door slowly cracked open. Spirit light suddenly appeared in Klein's eyes, reflecting an intertwined aura of different colors. His heart tightened as he pushed the door open, before taking a few steps back. The crack in the stone door widened rapidly, and a slimy black creature fell from above. It was a snake with a triangular head and red floral patterns on its head. It straightened its upper body, shot out its tongue, and looked at Klein with cold brown eyes. One snake after another fell from above the door as they piled up at the entrance. Klein saw a large hall beyond them. In the middle of the hall, countless snakes of various colors slithered together, forming an exaggerated nest of snakes about 10 meters wide. The slimy, disgusting feeling assaulted his senses. Klein felt his scalp turn numb as he couldn't help but take 2 steps back. He even wanted to look away without daring to look straight ahead. Although he was a man, he was still afraid of snakes. Snakes were the animal that he was most afraid of. This stemmed from a psychological trauma in the past. When he was a child, despite being way past his bedtime, he liked to secretly open the door to his room and watch movies with his parents through a crack. Unfortunately, his parents once watched a snake disaster movie. One scene involved the demolition of a building. The result was the unearthing of a large nest of snakes, and the dense squirming remained deeply imprinted in his mind. Can the slumber charm affect so many snakes? Klein swallowed hard and said to the air, "Do you have any solutions?" Miss Bodyguard in her black Gothic dress quickly appeared by his side, her mouth tightly closed. She didn't say a thing. Klein looked at her and she looked back at Klein, but no one spoke. When a snake slowly slithered out, Klein finally coughed and repeated, "Do you have any solutions?" Miss Bodyguard didn't answer. Instead, she floated and suddenly, a cold wind blew in the passageway. Whoosh! The wind howled as it blew into the hall. The temperatures dropped rapidly as it approached the temperatures of the outside world. Whoosh! The densely packed snakes in the middle of the hall suddenly slithered in all directions, searching for a warmer, more suitable spot to survive. 2 to 3 minutes later, a thin layer of frost formed on the surface of the hall and the passageway, and countless snakes had disappeared without much of a trace. Whoosh! The continued as Klein said, chattering, That's quite enough." The surging cold wind slowed down, but the cold didn't subside. Miss Bodyguard's figure disappeared once again. Klein lifted his cane-wielding right hand, covered his mouth and nose, and sneezed. Then, he raised the lantern and cautiously walked through the stone door into the wide hall. The style here was identical to the passageway outside. There were 8 circular columns of the same color erected there. Metal poles hung from the high dome, and at the bottom were candlesticks carved into different creatures. An upside-down candlestick. As a university student of the history department, a person who could barely be called an elite in this field, Klein made a preliminary judgment based on this unique arrangement. A structure of the 4th epoch,